Good afternoon, parents. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn for the pivot point of mental health advocacy. Our speaker today, Dr. Regina Lewis, leads and has alliances with worldwide organizations specializing in leadership development and organizational communication. With clients ranging from Fortune 500 companies through not for profit agencies to educational institutions, Dr. Lewis's proven specialty is leadership. Professional excellence, cultural inclusion, entrepreneurship, executive coaching, strategic development, and executive public speaking coaching. Regina is a consulting partner, international speaker, virtual monitor, external evaluator, researcher, and policy examiner, program report reviewer, writer, and CEO of Regina Speaking LLC. Through this company, she has worked with clientele executives, groups, and organizations in Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Hong Kong, China, Ethiopia, Vietnam, Brazil, and the United States, to name a few. Dr. Lewis has presented her award winning program, Cultural Excellence Ideas and Decisions, and facilitated widely on topics of cultural competence, diversity and inclusion, cross cultural leveraging, strategic planning, executive speaking, interpersonal communication, entrepreneurship, and public relations, social media, academic retention, and understanding and climbing out of poverty. As a war veteran who honorably served the United States Air Force, Dr. Lewis is Professor Ermita for Pikes Peak State College and executive coach for the Center for Creative Leadership. Regina holds a doctorate in educational leadership, research and policy, a Master's of Art in Communication, and Bachelor's of Arts in Communication, and as a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology. Regina's work in diversity and inclusion has become an award-winning program. Additionally, her publications are found in books, refereed journals, and educational textbooks. Please help me welcome Dr. Regina Lewis.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that we're back together again. I'm always looking forward to working with all of you here at Parents Challenge. So today I'm really excited about this particular topic because it's such an important topic. And the topic is really about mental health and what can we do about this? How can we support it? So I have a program, it's actually called MHALT, which is Mental Health Leadership Training. And so with this advocate leadership training, actually, but what this is really about is how can you be an advocate for mental health? So today's objective is really to define advocacy, to understand the role of an advocate, know the challenges of seeking mental health care, delineate a mental health empowered advocate leader from a mental health advocate, identify and respond to the federally protected classes under Title VII, initiate mental health communication, recognize the need for advocacy, self-care, as well as seeking additional resources. So there's a lot of things that we're going to be covering. But what I would like for you to do is just think for a moment, what do you think of when you think of mental health? What I'd like for you to do is in the chat, go ahead and put down what is your first thoughts when you think about mental health? Being balanced, therapy, self-care, friends and family members who have struggled with overwhelmed and life being too much, the ability to think accurately about life, mental stability, your peace, emotional balance, welcome parents. Oh, I see what that says. Sorry, self-care, someone who is mentally challenged, having a true and right perspective on the world. This is really interesting, the things that you're putting in here, and I really do appreciate the responses from everyone. There's 26 of us in here. And so when we have this type of participation, that's really important. And I think that the more that we can be engaged and work with one another, the more meaningful it is. Just so that you know, we will be going into breakout rooms, possibly. You're going to be having discussions. I'm going to be asking you to unmute yourself or raise your hand or be able to put in the chat. And so participating is really, really important. So I really do appreciate that. So, what I'd like for you to do is just think for a moment about your mental health. Unfortunately, we oftentimes hear mental health is when you have something wrong, some type of challenge, as opposed to the complete umbrella of mental health. Like we all have some type of mental health. It could be a challenge or it could be very, very good. And what are you doing about your mental health? So, all of the things that were listed here, balance, self-care, family, thinking, all of those things, what do you do specifically for your mental health? Like, what is one thing that you do that you could share with others that they could say, oh, I didn't think about this. That's something I could do. So, put in the chat, what are some things for your mental health? And then, if a few people wouldn't mind raising their hand, so while others are typing it in, I can hear from a couple of people. And because I'm a teacher, I'm good at calling on folks. So I'm giving you a chance to raise your hand first. And then if I don't hear from anybody, then I probably will call on Monica and Kayla first. Anybody raising their hands?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you asked.
Just what do you do for your mental health to take care of yourself? Do you have anything that you do specifically, Heather?
I do adult coloring, and actually baking is something that is huge for me. It's a huge stress relief. So
Oh, that's great. That sounds great, actually. So thank you for sharing with
yeah,
that. Monica, what about you?
I like to make candles. So yeah, that's something that I like to do to like kind of zone out and create candles and scented candles, all different kind of candles. Yeah.
Really?
Yep. It's
Oh,
really,
wow.
really like calming.
That sounds wonderful. So my fiance, he does Legos. He loves Legos, but he has PTSD, and so he's always downstairs doing his Legos. So we set up a Lego room, and the two of us at 9 o'clock, we go in there and we do Legos for about an hour before I go to bed because I got to get some rest for sure. So there's all different types of things. Some people say, "Oh, this is good. Set boundaries." Yes, for your mental health, right? Take time for yourself, walk with God, self-meditation, um, exercise, time in nature, go on walks, talk to friends. It would be really good if you go through the list here and take a picture of that so that when you feel like you're struggling, these are things that you could actually do. And what I'm going to ask is if one of our hosts, if you don't mind taking pictures of that and I get that list, if you wouldn't mind sending me a list of what people do, I think that would be fantastic. But these are things not only that you do, but you could share with other people. So here's something that I want you to do very quickly again in the chat. I want you to write down as many words or phrases that means advocate, the word advocate. So put that in the chat. What does advocate mean? What are some words for that? Connecting, standing up for a belief or person, speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves, standing up for someone, speak on behalf of someone or an issue, supporter, defender, works on your behalf. Yes. And there's so many different ways that people see and think of an advocate. And so I want to put advocacy in the context of this work. So the goal for this training is for you to become a mental health advocate leader. And so what does that actually mean? What does it actually look like? So when we look at it, first of all, we think about public service, provider, listener, mental health guide. These are some of the things that are thought of. But let's put it in a definition. So just as simple as dictionary.com, it says a person who publicly supports or recommends a particular cause or program. So the key here is to look at this right here, recommends a particular cause or program. That's going to be key. Yes, you do support, but you also recommend. So the goal for you as an advocate would be to actually be able to recommend places, not to tell someone what to actually do. So this is the reason why, if you're going to be a mental health advocate, you want to make sure that you know what an advocate is not. And the reason why we're doing all this is that, just like in the title, it says pivot. There's a lot of challenges, and you could be pivotal in pointing a person who is having mental health challenges into another direction. So an advocate is not a trainer. So you're not going to train anyone to do anything as an advocate. You're not there to advise. So in other words, you're not going to advise a person, what they need to take. Like, you should start eating this or drinking that, or go to this particular place and get fixed. So we're not there to advise a person. We're not there to administer treatment. So you're not going to give people treatment for their mental health challenges. That's not what an advocate is. So if you decide that that's something that you're going to do, any of these things on the list, that's up to you, but that is not what I'm training. I'm training for you to be strictly an advocate. So you're not there to diagnose either. So you don't want to tell a person, oh, you have, and then name something, ADHD, or you have Asperger's, or that isn't what an advocate does. You're not there to be their therapist. And you don't want to assess their mental illness, and you don't want to create programs. There are people who do all of these things and are an advocate. But just as an advocate of its in and of itself, that isn't something that you do. But there's so many people who do not go to seek mental health care. They don't do that. And there's many reasons why. Well, one, because there's a confusion between what is an advocate and what is an advisor. So let's look at this for a minute. An advocate is someone who follows the person who's having the challenge. So if you have somebody sitting down with you, so say, for instance, it's me, and I'm telling you I'm struggling and there's things that are going on, instead of trying to lead me, which is an advisor, you are following me, you're listening, and you're asking me more questions like a coach, So tell me more about that. Well, what do you think it is? So you are behind the person, not in front of them. So you're not guiding, you're not leading. You make some suggestions, but not recommendations. So the difference between the two is when you make suggestions, you're saying, this is something that I've done, or I've known other people's to do. Might I suggest that you look into that? Not recommend, I think that you should do this. I think you need to go talk to this person. You want to have people to consider different things that they could do by looking into it themselves, not you telling them that that's what they need to do. So you ask questions, and then you want them to self-reflect as opposed to you directing them. So an advisor is going to offer direct advice and solutions, and they're going to offer insight based on their knowledge and expertise. So look at this and make sure you know the difference. Is there anyone who has any questions about the difference between the two? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have you go into a breakout room for like 10 minutes. And in that time, I want you to talk about, why do you think there are so many people who don't seek mental health care or don't do mental health care, even though they may need it? So that's the question. Why don't people seek mental health care? And so we're going to put you in breakout rooms, be in there for about 10 minutes, and then we'll return back. All right, we're all back. So I really would like to hear, what did you all come up with in your breakout room? And so let's look at breakout room number 1. There was like Autumn, I think Dawn, Hope, Cruz was in that one. Anybody want to talk about a little bit about what they came up with in terms of why some people are not open about, going to mental health care?
Our group, we talked about the stigma of mental health, that there's maybe shame involved and like some maybe like self-blame, like that problem is our fault for mental health. Um, and then like that you have to face it instead of avoid it. Um, and like someone's going to hold you accountable, maybe if you go talk to somebody and not just be able to hide it anymore and not deal with it.
Sure. Thank you so much for that, Hope. I appreciate it. In room 2, what about you? There was Christy, Elizabeth, Holly, Monica.
A little bit of Monica. Oh, sorry.
Ashley, that was great.
We talked
Ah.
about the stigma also, talked about maybe some cultural barriers. Sometimes certain cultures are not as quick to trust other people as far as healthcare in general and things like that. Also just maybe knowing how to deal with your insurance and paperwork and monetary. Some people can't afford it, and then just the stigma overall, I think, is the biggest thing we talked about.
That's powerful. Thank you so much for that. Room 3 with Hannah, Kat, Kelly, Kim. Oh, wow, all those Ks. Did you talk about anything that you could add to what's been discussed already?
We talked about kind of like the fear around like getting help and the fear of being judged and like just the fear of like the unknown of knowing like what could come from it. Um, and then just like the fear of taking, the time and then being judged and the change that might have to come from that.
Fantastic. I see your baby. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, the new scholar. What? Oh my gosh. I love it. Thanks for sharing. Room 4, Ashley, Heather, Michelle, Sally.
So we talked a lot about the challenges once you agree to getting mental health, being able to afford it, having your insurance cover it, finding a therapist that can take your insurance, finding times available, finding the right fit, somebody that you trust. That it can be really overwhelming. I had a personal experience where I called Colorado Crisis Services and they said they would send somebody out and took all my information. And then a half an hour called back and said, never mind, we're not coming. And those kinds of things just put a big roadblock for going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can see that being absolutely devastating. So thank you for sharing that. And then room 5. Guess that, let's see, Kayla, Melanie, Angie.
I think our group covers almost all of that with the stigma and then the culture, but mostly the culture. It's not so much trusting. It's how, there's a difference in some cultures about prioritizing your physical health versus your mental health. So
Mhm.
it's, and the thing about the dirty laundry is stays within. So a lot of times people don't seek mental health because you don't want to go and talk to someone else. You don't want to be judged, or you don't want to discuss about what's at home.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, for sure. Something that Cruz had brought up in the chat said some people like the way they feel when they are not medicated. So they deny it and try to live without medication. Yes. So I'm working with someone who they need to go and, get diagnosed, but their parent is concerned about the medications and things like that. So I can definitely see where that could be a challenge. So that really adds to the list that I had, stigma, your culture. There's some cultures that don't believe in that. Distrust in the system or in therapists, misinformed about what mental health care really is or therapy is. It's generational, we never did that. That's not the way we do things around here. How it has been viewed, that maybe that's negative. There's some places that it's kind of like a status. Oh, I have to go see my therapist, which is like the opposite just about for that same thing. Feel unsafe in some aspect, or unsafe because you're going to be treated differently than others might be treated, and it may not be a good space or place. Can't afford it, as we talked about. And then the expectations, thinking, well, I'm expecting them to do X, Y, Z, and that might not be good for me. So those are other reasons. So why are some people not open about their mental health challenges? Not a cultural norm, afraid of judgment, beliefs, social class, how society accepts them, society expectations, and fear of being exposed. All the things that you all have pointed out. So we're right on the same place. So any of you ever hear of mental health first aid? So that's another advocacy training. It's another way to do this. So there's many different people that are doing mental health advocacy training. And so I really want to distinguish between the mental health leaders, advocate leaders, and just mental health advocates, what the difference is. And it's actually because we as advocate leaders consider the 10 federally protected classes under Title VII and take an individualized approach to our advocacy. So it's not just enough to give everybody blanket advice. Because of your background, because of the layers of intersectionality, different people see it differently, and we want to take those things into consideration to really be helpful and supportive and be the advocate that we set out to be. So the 10 protected classes is age, citizenship, color, disability, genetic information, national origin, race, religion, sex, and veteran. So these are the different ones that you really should, consider. So when you think about these 10 different protected classes, here are some of the things to consider. Their experiences. What are their experiences when it comes to mental health that would either stop them from going or help them to move forward? Or what have they seen in their world? How have they dealt with mental health challenges, concerns that they may have? the services that are available for specific groups of people. What does that look like? And you can, I mean, there are many different groups that you can look into for different groups, and the connections that you can make between them and someone else based on those protected classes. Like, can you connect the veterans with Mount Carmel or something? You know, like there's different connections. I put this question mark at the bottom because maybe you can think of other things that we need to consider. So when you're talking to someone and it sounds like they are having some type of mental health challenge or crisis or concern, how can you actually engage in the talk when these individuals may not typically open up? So here's just a few things that you could do. One, you can observe and express concern. You know, I noticed that, you know, you've been sleeping quite a bit, like all through the day, and that's not what I usually see from you. Are you okay? You know, it's just asking. You can share personal situations. You know, there are people who are stressed out and they say, well, I take care of my mom who has dementia. And then I'm able to talk to them and say, well, hey, I know what being stressed out is. You know, we can empathize with people. Talk about a story or an event to start the conversation. Did you hear in the news that 35% of people are challenged with whatever? Fill in the blank. So if you have a way to start that conversation, it would be great. Or ask open-ended questions about how they take care of themselves. And then if they share, validate their feelings. So these are some things that you can actually do to move forward. But there's also things to avoid. One, avoid making assumptions as to what you think is the problem or that they have a problem. You've got to allow them to speak on their own behalf. Another is don't minimize their feelings. Even if it's something that you say, oh, that's easy, that's nothing to worry about. Yeah, to you, but not to everybody. And thirdly, which I think is extremely important, don't pressure someone into talking if they don't really want to or if they're not ready. So those will be really important pieces to take into consideration. At the same time, as an advocate, and you're starting to hear what other people go through, that can be very taxing on you. And that's where you have to take recognition of, how am I feeling hearing what they're saying? How am I feeling when I leave and go home? Am I absorbing the problem myself, taking it on? And then talk with someone about your feelings if you really feel challenged. So take your own advice. So being mindful of that is extremely, extremely important. So now that you've looked at them, you looked at yourself, when you're engaging in the conversation, there are some responsibilities. When do you say something and how? So if somebody says something like, you know, threatening themselves or others, right? There are some HIPAA laws and the NASW Colorado chapter laws. It states that health professionals must break confidentiality and report individuals who express a serious threat to themselves, others, or target entities. So remember, as someone who is not a professional, which is you, right? If you're just an advocate, you're not a professional. Ethically, you should report it, but it does not hold you to the same standards. But one thing that I, as an advocate trainer, does hold you to, that is confidentiality. If someone comes and talks to you, you don't go and share their information with someone else. Now, you might share the situation, like, here's a situation to get some advice, but sharing who it is and their more specific private information, that's not something that we do. So you would have to be in line with holding confidentiality. Very, very important. Now, I want you to think about resources besides yourself and mental health professionals that you can recommend to people seeking further directions. Like, so what are some resources? Where can you advise them to be or go and talk to someone that's not a professional and is not you? I'm going to start out with one, a barber. Like when I start thinking about those protected classes, I think about like in the barbershops that my son grew up in, and my brothers and my father, the barber themselves, there was always conversation, always deep conversation. And sometimes that might be the place where they get some advice from. So that is some place that you could advise. Where else could they go? And if you think of any, put that in the chat. Where else can you advise people to go to? Let me see. See what people have placed in the chat. Support groups. Yes. Church, pastors, men's groups, NAMI. Yes. Fantastic. Online resources like Support Online, church. Yes. These are things which are true. If you think of any more, put them there. I used to be a hairstylist and I agree. Yes. Yes, that's true. Nail and hair places, church groups. Yes. Mentoring. Keep them going. I placed on here pastor, trusted coworker, close friend, relative, teacher, parents. These are other places that people can actually go. So there are some mental health resources for these protected groups. Here's just to name a few. So you can jot these down so that you can have them, but BetterHelp, that's for anyone. You can get help online that's private and you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go visit anyone. NAMI, which was mentioned, Mount Carmel, Inside Out Youth Services, BEAM, which is Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective, Law Care, Lawyers, Depression Project, and eHome Counseling for Vets. So those are at least a few that people could actually do. So keep those in mind and you can always add to the list. If you have any suggested places that aren't on this list, if you wouldn't mind putting them in the chat, and then my support staff that's on here right now, if you wouldn't mind capturing those for me, that would be great. You have a handout as we're wrapping up. I just want to let you know that you have a handout that has this in it. It has some other information for you in there as well. But this is something that you can do on your own. And that is to, first of all, place an X on the stairs where you believe you can be of support right now. So if you know that you could raise awareness on mental health, then put an X there. If you can help reduce the stigma, to let them know that this isn't as bad as what they think it is, and here's how they really do help, or you can even be the example, put a check mark there or an X there. Provide support to them to be an advocate, you could put that. Advocate for policy change, which by the way, the 2025 voting calendar is out. Please, please, please find that online. Find out when voting is for what issues. It's more important that we vote for things right here in our state and not to wait until it's time for presidency, because there's a lot of things that affects all of us. So I'm just saying, go online, find it, and start being prepared to vote all year long. Organize events and workshops. If you know you can do that about mental health, check that. Collaborate with service providers. Can you do that? foster inclusivity and diversity, crisis intervention, promote prevention and early intervention, lobbying for funding and resources, peer support and sharing personal experiences, and empower. So if you can do that, the more that you can do, you can just climb up those stairs and say, these are the things that I can do, those steps to supporting. You may not be able to do them all, but there are some things that we all can do. So with that being said, it's time to wrap up so that we can close out today's session. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
What does the LT stand for? On the
I know. Yeah. MHALT. Yeah. So it's mental health. Wait, what did I say? Mental health advocacy leadership training.
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And real quick, Ashley, what is your full name so I can give you credit?
It's Alvarado. I put it in the chat too, in case you need the spelling.
Okay.
Thank
You're
you.
Thank
welcome,
you.
What does
Erica.
it come up as? Oh, does it come up as Erica Ashley?
You just have Ashley on there.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So
Thank
I'm
you.
going to announce, thank you so much, Dr. Lewis.